like to also introduce yourself since I called on you?
I'm Joanne Depew. I am the Director of Technology, Data, and Assessment for the district.
Thank you, and thanks for that help too. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christopher Scarpine, principal at Springville Elementary School.
Thank you. Ann?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ann Rugg, Transportation Supervisor.
Thank you. Cindy?
Good evening, everyone. I'm an assistant principal at Springville Elementary and Springville Middle School.
Thank you. Joe?
Hi, good evening. Joe DiMartino, assistant principal at the high school, and I also oversee athletics.
And Kathy?
Kathy Townsend, Director of Special Education.
So you might notice if you have a middle school student that Principal Shanda Duclon isn't with us right now. She was walking her dog after school and her dog was attacked by another dog, so she had to rush her dog to the vet. We're hoping she'll be able to join us later in the call, but Cindy will be able to help out with any questions that we have from the middle schools, for the middle school specifically as well. So hopefully by now you've had a chance to see on our website a couple of things. Our reopening plan is up there with lots of different documents for you. Also, thank you to so many people who have already taken our needs assessment that we've asked you to participate in so that we know what devices and what things your family may need. And we're really going to just open it up now if you have any questions that you want to type into the chat to let us know what we can answer for you this evening.
So the first question, I would like to know if we have any plans for the choral students.
Yes, definitely. We're thinking about that. That is one of the classes that when we look at the guidance, they talk about the teacher being 12 feet away from the students and definitely using social distancing. We're hoping to have students outside and socially distanced outside for that class to the extent possible. And then I would just invite any of the principals who want to chime in on that subject to do so. Shanda answered this for us this morning. Anything you want to add?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I can speak specifically to the high school. We have definitely talked about this. Given the physical distancing requirements, outside is definitely going to be our best option. While the weather permits that, however, I will also say that Mrs. Noeson has thought quite a bit about how to still make chorus an engaging experience, both through virtual lessons, through other opportunities for kids to be able to sing and really focus on developing themselves as singers. So we'll be looking at all those options as well.
Can we also respond to orchestra, which is a question a little bit down the line?
So for orchestra specifically, it's in a little different boat because you don't, while you do need to breathe while you're playing, you know, a violin or a cello, breathing is not part of making the instrument make sound. So there we can have students physically distance 6 feet as opposed to 12 feet. And we're looking at being able to still conduct orchestra like we've been conducting it for the most part, especially with having our hybrid model of having half of the students in the building on a given day. The split actually works out quite nicely.
Anne, would you be able to answer the question from Julie? If we filled out the online survey, do you still need the yellow paper survey returned to Transportation Department?
We do not need that form unless you are adding an additional address to the one that you put in the survey.
Thank you.
And then our next question is, what is the plan for vocational students?
James, you want to take
Yep.
that?
I can take that one as well. So we are currently working with, we have a small number of students that attend CTE programs at Ellicottville. We are currently working with them on their schedule. Hopefully, if your child is attending the Ormsby Educational Center, you received a call from me yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago. Now I'm starting to lose track, quite honestly, indicating that Ormsby is going to follow the same schedule that we are. So students will be face-to-face instruction 2 days a week, and they will be virtual the other 3, and that will mirror our schedule here at SGI.
We did have some question on the call earlier. James and I had a different understanding of what was happening with our P-TECH students, and Mr. Bialysik was accurate. They are going to follow the same schedule that we have initially, with sort of that same philosophy that we had. You know, bringing back students at 50% seemed like a safer bet to make sure that everyone remains healthy and safe and allows us to follow the social distancing guidelines.
The next question asks if we should have received our purple or gold assignments.
I would think by today's mail, everyone should have that letter. I don't know if you know, I think that Justin's asking the question, and I know that Justin lives out in Collins. So if you have not received the letter by tomorrow's mail, I would definitely encourage you to call your children's principal, because we know a lot of people received their letters yesterday, some today, so those should be on their way to you.
And the next question is, how will Monday holidays be handled?
So we're hoping to do Monday holidays, that then our purple cohort will come to school on Tuesday, Wednesday, and our gold cohort will come to school on Thursday, Friday, and we'll bring our cleaning crew in full force then Wednesday night instead of during the day on Wednesday, to prepare for the next cohort to come in.
And the next question has to asking about full remote options.
So I talked about this a lot on the call earlier today, and our plan currently does not have a full remote option. We followed all of the guidance from the Department of Health, NICED, the CDC, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and all were really strongly encouraging to get students back in person to the extent possible. Having said that, I am listening to you, and while I do feel like the plan that we have before us is the very best for our students, I think that having them in person 2 days a week at least is a game changer. It allows us to develop relationships with students and to do a better job educationally. I am really listening to those of you in the community who feel strongly that you need a full remote option, and have worked on that pretty much since the last call today. And so you can expect to hear something more from me on that by the end of this week. I do want to say, if we consider a full remote option, that's a commitment that families have to make. For example, if you say you're going to do that, and then your child learns, oh, all of my friends are back in school, the second week of school, you want to shift back, that really creates some problems for us. Scheduling is a huge challenge this year anyway. And so if you choose a full remote option, if offered, then we really have to ask you to commit to that for a full semester for middle school or high school students, and a full trimester for elementary students. I think that that's fair and helps us to plan and to do a better job. What exactly that would look like? Well, since I've only been really thinking about it seriously since about 10 o'clock today, we don't have those details figured out yet. And to be really honest with you, that would depend upon the number of students that we have that really are looking at that. I have 9 families who have contacted me with a serious interest. And until we put out some kind of a survey to you, I have no way of knowing how many that might be.
The next question, I read that there would be 9 or 10 children per classroom. What does this mean for a 12-1 class?
I can answer that if that's okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
So absolutely. In our plan, you may have read that our self-contained classes of 12-1-1 and 8-1-1 will be attending school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Part of the reason why I suggest highly that these students come 4 days is because of their needs, and we are able to have these classes because none of them have 12 in there. So that's one of the questions that somebody's asking. And the classrooms that are at 8 or 9 students are big enough to maintain the social distancing space of 6 feet. And I know that that's asked somewhere down the line also by Ross Berry. So I hope that that answers both of those questions.
Thank you, Kathy. That really was a simple numbers game. You know, I had a mom call me earlier today and say, well, my child's in a 15-to-1. And I said, we can't socially distance a 15-to-1 classroom. So that's the only reason why we're not able to do that.
The next question asks about how remedial reading will be handled.
I'd be happy to chime in on that. I think it's going to look a little bit different, not just at SES, but also probably Colden a little bit, and then the middle school as well. I can tell you at SES, depending on the tiered level of the students, so we have tier 2 and tier 3 remedial readers. Tier 2 remedial readers at this point will look like they'll get their instruction while in the remote portion of their schedule, so as to get most of the content and review from the classroom teacher while they're on 2 days. The tier 3 readers will be getting their tier 3 reading intervention during the 2 days face-to-face that they are here, along with supplemental online instruction during those remote days.
If I read the next question correctly, it's looking at, now that we are here 2 days, can we change if it goes back to being 5 days?
If that means that we're comfortable with 2 days, but we might not be comfortable with 5 days, I think we would consider that. I think a really great question was asked earlier today that I'll just take the opportunity to repeat the answer to now. Someone asked what would be the trigger to move to full in-person, and I can't answer that. That really would not come from us. That would come from the governor's office, as so much of this guidance has come from his office, Department of Health, and NYSED. And so there would be, you would hear a lot about that in the news, and certainly that would be more dictated to us than us just deciding, okay, it went great for a month, we'll bring them all back. That wouldn't be something we would do, because remember, our main priority is we have to follow that guidance of 6 feet of social distancing, and we can't do that with all of our students in the classrooms.
The next question pertains to middle school, whether they will be switching classes or staying in the same room.
I'll answer that one. Students will be switching classes as they have in the past. We are going to have the hallway set up with arrows, so they'll be walking on different sides of the hallway and maintaining social distance as they do. We've increased the amount of time between classes so that the rooms can be cleaned and the desks can be cleaned off for the next group to come in.
And how will we socially distance 12 kids in a room?
I'm guessing that speaks to the way Kathy answered it earlier. There aren't.
Yeah, I think
actually
that's the same.
Okay. Please discuss how the virtual component of lessons will work. Will kids be interacting with their teachers on those days?
And then I think Charlotte's question about what's remote learning going to look like, just a bit lower than that. So let me take both of those. You're going to hear a lot in the news about the different ways in which schools are doing this. So let me first say, remember that our teachers have half of their students on Monday and Tuesday, and the other half of their students on Thursday and Friday. Well, we want them to focus on your kid when your child's in the classroom. So they are not going to be interacting during that time with the remote students. Instead, the way I've talked about this is when I was a teacher, I definitely had lessons that I didn't want my kids to miss. Right? I didn't want them to go to the band lesson because it was really important that they be with us for that part of the lesson. And then there were lessons that it was more group work or project-based work that it would have worked. Teachers will structure their classes with that in mind of what do they need to use their in-person time for to get the most bang for our buck, so to speak. And what you're probably also wondering are things like, is my child going to be required to be on the computer all day during remote learning? No. We really understand that parents, you have a lot of challenges. You have a lot of responsibilities with this, and we know that this has been hard on families. We designed our entire plan with you in mind as a family with what you're struggling with or dealing with at home. So it will be asynchronous, meaning that you will be able to complete what you need to do on the timetable that works for you. Having said that, it will be much more, I think it will be much more structured from the standpoint of having definite people that are accessible to you, like on Wednesdays, which are remote for everyone, teachers will be available for at least 4 hours. Now, sometimes that might be a class that the teacher schedules, especially if you think about the high school level, right? High school kids can sit and be on a class on the computer for an hour, but that will change based on grade level and what the teacher's preference is. And then we will definitely have teachers available to children every day of the week during the school day. But we might pull someone in who doesn't have the same caseload as a grade level teacher to help answer questions and to be available to students and families during the day.
And I also believe that covers the next question as well from Jody. So if we move to the question from Tara, will PE classes be held outdoors or indoors when weather does not permit?
Can we stop before we go to Tara's question about PE? And there was a part of Jody's question that I don't think I've addressed adequately. And it's the part of the question where she's saying, will students be just given assignments and have to complete assignments? I think it's worth spending some time on this because in the spring, you know, nobody knew that was coming. I certainly never thought it was going to last the rest of the school year. And so everybody got a free pass. There were some negatives to that. We had students who were in the 90s in the fall who just like bagged it and didn't do anything for the spring. And so we do need to make sure, we have to count every day as a substantial day of learning. We're still required to have 180 days of instruction. So we do need to raise our level of expectation for what's happening on those days. And so you will expect that it isn't just like we wave a wand and say, everybody's good. We really need to make sure that we're thinking about substantial learning for every student. And I'm sorry, Joanne, if you would then go back to the question, the question about PE classes.
PE classes, yes.
So we are really stressing the need to have our students outdoors to the extent possible. We have a lot of green space on all of our campuses. We're going to really encourage teachers to take their students outside for normal classroom instruction wherever possible, but then especially for PE. Unless there is a torrential downpour, we should have our kids outside for PE class.
The next question has to do with boys and girls clubs or any options for childcare.
I'm really happy to answer this question because I just had this conversation with Dan Stevens this morning, and I know they're meeting this evening for the club, and we agreed that certainly we want to have the Boys and Girls Club in before and after school, both at Colden and Springville Elementary School. I did say that they absolutely have to follow the guidelines in our plan when they're in the building. And so I've asked that they make sure that everyone reads our reopening plan. And then there may be greater restriction to space just from, you know, we have a really high standard of cleaning that we'll be doing during this time, but I know our families need that. And I'm excited to say yes to that question.
So if children are in daycare or childcare on a virtual day, are they able to get on in the evening and have that count as attendance?
Yes.
Will virtual learning be on a common platform like Google Classroom or something like ClassDojo? If so, will there be some help for parents and children being familiarized?
I love this question, and I'm going to let Chris go into detail, but our reopening committee talked about this a ton. Like I heard from a mom who has 4 kids in different buildings, and she talked about the challenges in the spring of just keeping up with emails and the different platforms and the different ways kids had to connect. So when we planned for reopening this year, I know the principals worked really hard on that committee with others to make it a better experience from a family's point of view. Chris, will you talk about the details of that?
I think I'll speak to one part of it. And that's the part where we know what's coming. And I think that's helpful to us as we plan forward. When we went into the quarantine in the spring, it really came out of nowhere. I can remember being in school one day and the next day not, and really just like, holy cow. So what's good is that the first couple of weeks of school, teachers will familiarize their students with the platforms that they will be using virtually, teach the kids how to maneuver in those platforms, show them where they'll find their assignments, how they can respond to assignments, how they can ask questions. So that first couple of weeks of school will be that instruction piece for the students. And then obviously we'll provide the parents the support they need with any questions they might have on any of the platforms we're using from that point.
Just to add on to that, we are looking at Google Classroom and with the ability for some other platforms, but we're looking to really funnel through the Google Classroom experience. So at least it should streamline where you need to go to look where your children's assignments are. The next question is, any plans for concerts or musicals?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to answer this question the way I'm about to. No, there are no plans for that until we're allowed to do so in a safe manner. We also aren't able to plan any field trips right now. I mean, this is heartbreaking to us. We have, we were talking about how we could get the 8th grade trip to Washington for our 8th graders in 9th grade. And now we're sitting in a position where our seniors don't get to go to Pittsburgh in September. I want you to know that as soon as those opportunities are able to be done safely, we will reinstate them. Mr. Bialczyk and I had a conversation today about how important extracurricular activities are. We've held back on hiring for those thus far as we've planned other things, but we will likely offer an opportunity for teachers who want to apply for those extracurricular positions to give us an idea of what can you do in the format that we're in to still bring those opportunities to our kids. And I'm going to just take the next question from Charlotte about Early Bird. It's my understanding that Early Bird has been fully open and operational during the entire closure, and I would encourage you to call them and find out if they have opportunities available for your children.
The next question is tips on how to do virtual with kindergarten.
I'm going to defer to my friend from the elementary building.
I can kind of help with that a little bit, although I'm not a kindergarten teacher. I think those women and men will certainly go straight to heaven with all their knowledge. But we did kindergarten screening this week, and I had a lot of those questions. What does it look like when a child's just learning everything brand new? And I think that will be a challenge for our kindergarten teachers. I know they're up to the task, but I can think of simple things that they will learn. They'll learn their letters while in class. They'll learn the sounds and then reviewing those letters. Things that are simple. Keep them engaged, keep them excited about school. The last thing we want to do to those little ones is burden them with too much rigorous work at home where, you know, mom and dad are trying to cook and get the kids ready and this one's screaming for help. So we're going to try to make it manageable for families and yet still get them where they need to be.
Yeah, kindergarten is such a crucial year to help kids learn to love school. And it's another one of the reasons why we really want the 2 days of in-person so that we can help kids to form that connection with their teachers.
The next question is, there any specifics in place, anything specific in place for children whose parents both work on days on home instruction?
I'm not sure if Victoria is asking. I guess I'm going to ask Victoria Newman to clarify the question a bit at the end of the chat so I can better answer it. If you're asking, like we'll have a helpline, we'll have someone that kids can call in for help with homework or Zoom in for help with homework. But if you're asking specifically, will we have childcare available for your children? Unfortunately, we're not capable of doing that. You know, one of the things we don't talk about on this call is we're also under an extreme financial challenge this year with the governor who's given his director of budget the authority to cut our budget revenue mid-year. So we are trying to be really fiscally responsible at the same time, prioritizing those things that we need to purchase that impact health and safety and holding back on anything that we can otherwise.
The next is the lunch question. Will they be eating in the classroom or cafeterias?
This was a tough one. This was one that principals really struggled with. Who wants it, guys?
Yeah, I can take it. And this question definitely came up earlier today. So giving a very similar answer, we've worked really hard over the past few years to make our cafeteria a really social place. We've gotten round tables, which are great for kids sitting around and socializing and unwinding during their lunch period. They're terrible for physical distancing. So in our buildings, we will be bringing in student desks. However, we're going to arrange those so that it's not like students are lined up to take an exam. They're still going to be able to face each other, but they'll be safely distanced away from each other so they can eat their lunch. They're still able to converse with friends, and we can do both things, accomplish both goals in a safe way. So, you know, picture the cafeteria filled with individualized desks, all spaced at least 6 feet apart, so the kids could do exactly what I said, eat their lunch and still be physically distanced.
But if a student lives with a family member at risk?
Well, earlier I would have answered this by saying that you need to get medical documentation and have your student apply through the 504 process to receive full remote learning. But as I said earlier in the call, I've spent a lot of time today thinking about this, researching it, talking to my colleagues, talking to our leadership team. And I do think that we will likely offer a full remote option for our families. But I have not even discussed that with our Board of Education yet, which I need to do. And then you can expect to hear more from me about that by the end of this week.
And a question similar to earlier today about Labor Day and being a holiday and possibly going remote the first couple of weeks.
So we do have the same requirement for 180 days. So sometimes I think you get our school calendar and you think, why do they do it this way? And why do we not have the Wednesday before Thanksgiving off? But all of those days are impacted by the way the calendar falls. We do have all of our superintendent's conference days rescheduled for the beginning of the year. So you've seen, if you've gotten the letter, our students come back on the 10th and 11th. And we're really hoping, so I'm going to think about how I say this. We're doing absolutely everything that we can within the school building to keep everyone safe and healthy. We didn't just put that plan up on our website to comply with a requirement from state ed. We sincerely mean what we say in that plan and expect to follow the plan to keep everyone safe and healthy. So we need people doing that outside of school as well. You know, I'm not responsible for everything that happens outside of school. We need people to be smart. And I have to guess that our community is being really good about those things because we've had the infection rate come down. And so I have to just hope people are smart and they do the right thing. I know that every one of you probably can cite an example of when they did not, but we're going to hope that that goes well.
And what happens if a student is identified as having COVID-19 after attending school?
So this is a question that it's so critical that you look at our plan on the website and you pay attention to your children every day before they come to school. And if your child has a symptom of COVID, you keep your child home. We're saying the same thing to our adults, and we have a protocol on the website. You can see a section called COVID-19. But what happens with this is, I think there's a lot of misconception in the public about what happens with a COVID-19 person. And that is not us. We're not testing kids. We're not contact tracing. We're educators. That is not our purview. It's not something we've been trained to do. We immediately contact the Erie County Department of Health. I was on a call with Dr. Gail Burstein for a couple of hours on Monday, and the Department of Health kicks in with all of that. And they take care of calling the principal. By the way, principals, I had to give the Erie County Department of Health all of your cell phone numbers earlier today because Erie County Department of Health wants to contact the principal. They want their contact tracers contacting the principal if someone ends up COVID positive. And then there are protocols within the plan about what happens. We also can't require, no one can force someone to have a COVID test. So there are different protocols if you have symptoms and you have a test or if you don't have a test. And honestly, I think your best resource is to really look at the links that we have on the website to the Department of Health to make that as clear as possible.
And where can they find the needs assessment?
That is front and center on our school website. And Joanne, didn't we have I think we've had 500 people fill that out already?
Oh, we're up 775.
That's good. We're halfway there because we actually need one of those for every student. So that's front and center on the website. If you are on this call, you clearly have access to the internet, but if you know someone who doesn't and they need a paper copy of the needs assessment, please tell them to call my office. That's 592-3230, and we will mail them a paper copy.
Next question, when will we be receiving the bus assignments?
I'll answer that to the best of my ability. We are currently working on putting bus routes together. As soon as we have the majority of the data that we've been collecting from the survey and the needs assessment, we will get the routes finished and we'll get that information out to you probably by a letter or postcard.
And I think, Ann, you can respond to the next one as well, asking once they receive the information, they already fill out the assessment, what should they do? They checked specific days. Should they just call your office?
Yeah, if they have any questions about any of that, they can just call the office. We'll help them figure it out.
Brian, I see your note. What we'll do is end up sending out a commitment letter. And so you'll be able to fill out that Google form to tell us that you would like a full remote option for your children.
And people with limited or no internet are going to be able to do classes online. I can take part of that. We are looking at some MiFis to be able to use, but those places that have no internet or no cell phone reception, we'll have to work with the buildings to figure out how to do assignments without, that don't require that.
But in addition to that, we've had open Wi-Fi in all of our parking lots since the beginning. And listen, the last thing I want you to have to do is sit in the parking lot to get your kid access to the internet. If you literally have no way of accessing online learning, we will figure it out with paper materials for your kid. But we do want to help accommodate your needs and get you what you need to the extent possible. However, if you live somewhere like I do, you can't even, like, there's no internet to buy even there. So then we'll have to figure something else out for your children.
Mrs. Morris, can you make Shanda a co-host while I read the next question?
Yes.
Will the start and end times be the same as they have been in the past?
Yes.
Information on hybrid OT and PT services.
Hi, I can take that one. We're in the process of figuring out caseloads, and for our students that come to school 4 days a week, they will be delivered during the school day. For the students that are 2 days a week, it will also most likely be a hybrid depending on need and amount of services.
So the next question, Mr. Bielzik, can you walk somebody through a typical high school day?
Yeah, I mean, a typical high school day will really look very similar to the way it's looked in the past. The biggest difference is going to be all the universal precautions that we're taking. So the physical distancing, the number of people in the building, you know, those are probably the biggest changes. But as far as the schedule goes, we're still going to be following a bell schedule. There'll be additional time built in for cleaning. We're talking about dismissal at the end of the day and possibly doing some staggering of that to make sure that we don't have the mad rush out of the building at the end of the day. But other than that, schedule would look very similar to the way it's looked in the past.
Next question has to talk about students who are requested to quarantine, about absences, and how would they be able to complete assignments?
Yeah, the days of rewarding perfect attendance are gone. We need to make sure our students stay home when they're sick and they don't feel the pressure to get the keychain because they had perfect attendance. They need to stay home if they're sick or if they're showing symptoms and not be penalized for it. So that end of that question is, would it be counted against them if they miss school, or could they complete the classes remotely? So I'll just repeat at the beginning, this is one of the compelling arguments that made me really think about this remote option. I envision that we will have students quarantining because of having a symptom and moving in and out of full remote. So your child might be in the purple cohort coming Monday, Tuesday, then you worry that they've been exposed or that they have to quarantine and they go to full remote. until they come out of the quarantine and they come back to the purple cohort. I would answer that similarly for Erin Horton's question about if she has to travel to a restricted state for a family emergency after quarantine, would they be allowed to rejoin classes? Yes.
And then
It
circling,
falls into the same answers as chorus and orchestra. We really don't want to decimate our school program. The saddest thing is we've worked really hard for the last several years to build up our school program and offer lots of really cool opportunities to students. So the last thing we want is for them to lose all of those extra things.
and the next one, again, a high school question about science labs.
Who's got science?
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with the question. Where are you, Mrs. Depew?
So
What
does-
about science labs in the high school or other classes that typically meet every other day?
Oh,
from
okay.
PE?
So got you. Thank you. So science labs essentially would meet once a week as opposed to twice a week. So if your student is in the purple group, they would meet either on Monday or Tuesday. If they're in the gold group, they would meet either on Thursday or Friday. The state has made some concessions on the requirement of 1,200 lab minutes to say that those minutes can be accomplished in a virtual way. So that really helps us. Even without that virtual option, we have enough time with students meeting once a week to still meet that mandate. And so students will still be able to keep up with their science lab work because we know that that hands-on application is really important for them to engage in.
I'm just going to say if we don't address one of your questions directly, it's because I'm noticing the timestamp when it was entered and we've already answered the question. But if for some reason you entered the call late and we get near the end and you feel like, wait a minute, I don't know what the answer to my question was, please ask it again. So I'm going to skip down to Teresa's question about with lessons being taught primarily in the classroom, how much will this affect curriculum timelines and how will this affect testing? So that's an interesting question, right? I think that we had several parents in the spring who wanted to retain their children because they were so worried about what was missed. And we said to them, but we've missed that for a lot of kids, and good teachers don't just teach the same curriculum every year. They look at the children before them and they meet the needs of those children. So the number one priority when your kids come back to us in September will be for teachers to form relationships with students, listen to them, think about their social and emotional needs, form that relationship quickly so that if we do have to go back to full remote, they know the students. But right along with that, they're going to be assessing and thinking about what do these students need. I've used my grandson as an example. He completed kindergarten last year and he's not reading where he would have been reading had he been in kindergarten, right? That worries me. So right away, I'm hoping that his teacher, he doesn't go to Springville, or else I could impact that. I'm hoping that right away his teacher really works on his reading skills. That's the most important thing. I don't want him to fall behind with that. And I know that our teachers will be thinking about those things here.
And
And
the,
testing, who knows? I don't know how to answer that. You know, New York State testing, if it's going to happen at the end of next year, who knows? That probably won't be determined for quite some time.
and then the question above that did ask about a child who has an IEP, and if the parent has to work, and how can they have someone to assist them?
I can take that question. So if a student has an IEP, their special education teacher and case manager will work with parents as well as the general education teachers to make sure that they follow the individualized education program for the student. And my office is always open for phone calls, conversations, as well as the teachers and the managers. So don't hesitate to reach out.
And if a student misses their 2 days in person during that scheduled week, will they be able to access what they missed in Google Classroom?
Yes. Victoria's question is interesting to me because I'm guessing, Victoria, you didn't receive your letter yet, but we worked really hard to schedule households together so that your children come on the same day. If we missed that with you, call your child's principal and we'll make some adjustments for you.
And the next question talks about overlapping Zoom calls and meetings. Are we going to have a schedule of an online class that could be done during their regular class time?
So I wonder if this was teachers for different students in the family. Chris, do you have an idea what?
Mrs. Moritz, we came across this issue as we were learning the process. Oftentimes families will have students in, say, 1st and 4th grade. And because everybody's remote, that 1st grade teacher isn't necessarily communicating with the 4th grade teacher to make sure that their classes didn't overlap. Towards the end of the quarantine, when we became wise to this, we created a Google document so that teachers from multiple grade levels could list the times of when they were going to Google. And we also got as far as knowing if we had a sibling, right? So if I had a sibling that was in my class with Joanne's, we tried to make that work. We can continue to refine that process so that we aren't putting families in a bind where you have 2 kids on a Google Zoom or on a Zoom at the same time. That makes it very difficult.
And I think in addition to that too, last time we looked at giving out devices by family, we are trying to accommodate more and are really looking by child. So if you can fill that survey out, that's one of the questions that we do ask for each child. So the next question, if we are giving 2 days a week and then 3 days on their own, is this going to be pass fail?
Who wants to take how we're handling grading this year?
I can start. I would say that this is when Mrs. Moritz spoke earlier about a more structured system. I think this is one of the places that will certainly be more structured. As a parent, certainly at the secondary level, you can expect grades to be given as grades were always given prior to March 15th of last year. So whether on remote or whether students are doing work face-to-face, it's all feeding into the same system. It's all the same learning. And so students will be receiving grades on assignments. They will be getting grades in courses. And so it will not be a pass-fail system. It will be a typical grading system that we have used. I think elementary is going to be fairly similar.
I would say Justin Smith's question about, did anybody else want to answer that one? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump over you guys. I just noticed there are 62 more questions and it caused me to panic. Go ahead. If anybody else wants to talk about grading, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mrs. Moritz.
I was just going to answer. Justin Smith has a question about supply lists online. We did ask teachers to really be thoughtful about the burden on families right now. So hopefully those supply lists are manageable and they are supposed to be updated to reflect the remote learning. Am I accurate in that, principals?
If I also can add to that, in the event that the supply list cause any family any kind of stress, please call the school. I've said this quite a few times to our families. Don't let the supply list burden you. Call us and we will do everything we can to ensure that your students have everything they need when they come to school.
And just to add into that, we really encourage our teachers to cut back on the supply list as well.
And at the middle school, we're going to be posting our supply list on Friday. So you can look for that on our website.
And from the high school, we'll be posting ours beginning of next week. And I would echo all the same sentiments as everybody else. If there's any hardship that's created, you just need to reach out and let us know so that we can work with you. It's not meant to be a burden.
Can I ask that you guys are being really thoughtful with teachers? Because I can remember as a mother of a student being so irritated when at the end of the year, the brand new stuff I sent in at the beginning of the year came home and I knew that he had never used any of it. Like, let's not ask parents to buy a bunch of stuff that nobody's ever going to use. We'll talk about that on our faculty meeting next week, hopefully too.
And I just wanted to wrap back to the concerns about internet providers and connectivity. We are going to try and help families with what we can. Again, we are looking at some MiFi devices, but please make sure you just fill out the survey so that we know who you are and that we can reach out when it gets closer to school.
And Joanne, I'm going to loop back to Michelle Dell's question
Yes.
about busing, but will you then also answer Christine B's question about Chromebooks?
Yes. So we did talk about each student this time instead of families to answer Christine's as well. So we encourage you to fill out the survey and make sure that you indicate that. And we are going to try and accommodate as many as we can.
And so then going back to Michelle Dell, with concerns over busing, my children will be walking home, but if there is inclement weather, will they be able to ride the bus home instead of walking? Anne?
Because we are assigning each student a seat, that becomes difficult, putting extra students. I don't want to say no, that we would not be able to do that. It would depend on how many seats we have available on any given bus.
I'm going to take a moment just to talk about transportation while if we can pause here, and at least 134 people will hear me say this. We tend to be very accommodating to families in this district for whatever you need. We sometimes feel like our transportation department is the Uber of Springville for children. And so when you consider the restraints that we have in the cleaning and disinfecting and social distancing challenges we have with busing, we can't have that this year. You are not going to be able to call at the final moment and have your kid get on a different bus because that bus might have every seat full. So it's really going to take families working together to meet those challenges ahead of time this year.
I believe we've already addressed the question from Jody about being able for high schoolers to complete assignments on non-typical hours, and that was a yes. So that moves us to how is classroom and school ventilation being handled, especially during winter?
So I'm going to call on Dave Seiflein. I have found that the older I get, the more I realize that the dumbest people I know think that they know everything. And smart people know you can't know everything. So I'm going to defer to our facilities director to talk about ventilation and filters.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. So basically, the air filtration in our classrooms are basically going to be the same during the winter and as it is the summer. The biggest difference is we're going to be pulling in more outside air. Excuse me. State SCD requirements require us to pull a minimum of 10% outside air in, and we're going to be bumping that up and monitoring that. The problem during the winter is if we bring in more than 10% outside air on the really, really cold snap that we get, there's a possibility of freezing up coils and busting pipes and stuff like that. So there's a fine line that myself and our head custodians, we continue to monitor all of our building HVAC systems. And just briefly about the filters, these school systems were never designed as a health and safety to filter and try to pull, viruses and stuff out. But I can assure you that we have the absolute best air filters that we can possibly purchase in our systems that still make our systems work properly. We're not overworking them. We're not potentially having any fires from overloads. I can assure you that we are doing our absolute best with that. And I think one of the things we're thinking of, we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing our air filters more often to ensure that we're cleaning the air the best we possibly can. Another thing that we're looking at doing is running our air handling in our room ventilators longer before students are there and after students are there to help clean and circulate the air again also.
As much as we work to be financially responsible, this is not a place where we will cut corners. We will make sure that we're doing the best that we can here. And I also want to just say, if we get a week that is brutally hot in September, like we did last year, I reserve the option to say we're going to go to a full remote week, because those classrooms can be so hot. And the idea of students sitting with a mask on, on a 95-degree day is just not good for anybody. We can't obviously have fans blowing on them in the way that we have in the past. I'm really not sure how effective those are anyway. So there is the possibility that, as I have in the past had to call a snow day, that I could be calling heat days, but we would then transition and go to full remote that week. And I'll give you as much notice as I can on that.
And Kim, I just want to piggyback really quick back around on that, that when we have those hot spells, that what we do is we turn our air handling systems on in the evening hours and overnight hours. So as our roofs cool down, the outside temperatures cool down, we run our systems to draw that cool air in while it's cool, not blowing that warm air in all day. So just wanted to throw that out there.
So the next one, will there be less optional school work in the spring? It seems like everything was optional.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that. James answered that pretty thoroughly. And Michelle Dell asked the question about 6th grade students getting to tour the middle school. Cindy, I know you have a plan for that. Will you talk about that?
Sure, we're really excited for our 6th graders, and we certainly want them to come into the middle school to see the school and have a tour. So we're going to have information on our website shortly, and we will alert you to that for you to sign up for tours that we'll be conducting at the end of August.
And the next question is on fall updates. And actually, I think James would probably like to add that they're doing the same thing for 9th grade orientation as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, if you have an incoming 9th grader, hopefully you received a call from me at about 1:30 this afternoon to call and make an appointment for them to come in for their tour. So we will look forward to meeting everybody.
Followed by a question on fall sports.
Joe, do you want to take this one?
Sure, thank you. Yes, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, or NISFA, has given all the districts a starting date of September 21st, which would impact all 3 levels, modified, JV, and varsity. But we are still waiting for clearance from the governor, as he has an order out there that says there's no organized recreational activity on campus. So as soon as we get clearance from the governor to initiate those practices, there's a schedule in place, and we'll be ready to go. Thank you.
The next question is how preschool will be functioning.
So we're going to turn to Brooke Adams on that, who's responsible for UPK in our district.
Okay, so for UPK, they just submitted plans, and their plans at different boat. Instead of being approved by the state, they have to be approved by the district. So Superintendent Moritz and I, we approved those plans, and their director, Colleen, she will send something out to our UPK parents shortly. I'm hoping by the end of this week.
There is a bit of turmoil over UPK because they have not committed to funding UPK this year. It's a federal program, and so we're watching that really closely and advocating for the funding of UPK. It's one of the worries that I have foremost on my mind.
And just adding on to that real quick, UPK is looking at being 5 days a week.
Next question is, what does elementary music look like, and are they going to be able to pick an instrument?
That's a good question. Elementary music itself, the kids will have music class, yes. Mrs. Benstead at SES has committed to doing chorus as a virtual group. It goes back to what Mr. Bielczyk said earlier with band and orchestra and chorus at the high school. It's very difficult to socially distance. We oftentimes have greater than 100 kids in both of our choirs, so it becomes difficult. With regard to picking an instrument, that is one of the highlights of the 4th graders' lives. So my band and orchestra teacher are working on how to deliver these presentations. Oftentimes they will present the instrument, show them what it looks like, how it sounds, and then the kids then pick from that point. So they have a plan in place, and we're going to implement it. So a long answer to a short question is yes, they will be able to pick an instrument.
And I believe we have responded to the sports question from Jody, and that we will be giving grades on assignments for Rebecca. So that would bring us down to Stacy's question. Will you limit what children can bring into the building? For example, can they bring a packed lunch from home, and can they bring a backpack?
So we're not limiting that. And if you're keeping up with the current research, there seems to be less thought that the virus is transmitted on hard surfaces. And so we are going to allow students to have their materials with them.
The next question talks about greater utilization of outdoor spaces. Will students be able, that's 2 questions, greater use of outdoor spaces, and will students be required to wear a mask while seated at their desks?
So I'll take this one, Jill. I completely agree with you. We have such beautiful green space, and I really hope to see our students outdoors to the extent possible. I think that they should be out there using that space, because we know that all of the research keeps talking about that being the safest place for kids to be. And as far as wearing masks at their desks all day, we're required to have everyone wearing a face covering and being 6 feet apart, but we certainly are not going to require students to keep a mask on every minute of the day. If they're sitting doing silent sustained reading at the desk, they should be able to remove their mask. Teachers will use at their discretion mask breaks so that, you know, rather than saying something ludicrous like every hour on the hour at 2 o'clock, I'm going to sound an air raid horn and everybody gets a mask break. We're going to let the teachers consider where they are in their instruction and really teach our kids how to socially distance and follow all of the rules that are in play.
Just on the comment, which is the next question on laptops, which we've addressed, but just wanted everyone to know that everyone basically in the United States is trying to order these devices. I did put an order in on March 20th, which my original delivery date was November 16th. Subsequent to that, I have 4 other orders out from 4 other different companies with no delivery dates. So we will start with what we have. That's why we're asking families if they have devices, because we are basically ending school with the same number that we'll be starting school with. And as more become available and come in from the orders, we'll be able to assist more families. But please do fill out the survey and tell us that you need one, and we're going to do the best that we can. The next question is, will children be given a specific point of contact on remote learning days since their normal teacher will be teaching and teaching the other half of the students?
Yes.
How do we get parking passes and when?
Well, I'll take that one. I know that's really important to our juniors and seniors. So seniors hopefully have signed up for a time slot for their senior pictures next week. We will have parking pass applications available to them when they come in next week for those. We are also, unlike other years, going to expedite that process for juniors. So if you have a junior that already has their driver's license, they can certainly reach out to the school. Honestly, it's going to help our transportation department if our students can drive and if you feel comfortable with them driving. So we do want to make sure that all students are set up to be able to do that at the beginning of the school year. So seniors, next week they can pick them up. Juniors, please contact the school and we will get a form to you so we can get those passes issued. Thank you.
And so for Kayla, who I'm sorry that this was so far down in the chat about not being able to hear anything, on the bottom left of your screen, there should be a way that you can connect to audio. I apologize that that's been there for so long. I believe we have addressed the mask question from Sam. And so that leads us back to high school students go to different classes during their lunch periods.
Yes, that's definitely something that we will still allow. One of the things I love is to see students that have that deep connection with the teachers in the building. And obviously, if the teacher is okay with them coming in during their lunch period, that's definitely something we can still accommodate.
And the next question is actually was sent to me, but it's for the entire group. For students with IEPs who normally attend speech, OT, and PT, and extra help throughout the week, how are they going to be getting those services? Is Kathy?
Did we lose Kathy?
I think we may have.
I'm still here, but you keep going in and out. Sorry.
Did you
Can you repeat the question for me? I did
wondering
not.
how
And I,
speech, OT, and PT services will be administered.
yes. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. The students that are in 4 days a week will get their speech, OT, and PT during the course of that week. The students that are in twice a week, that will be done on a hybrid model depending on needs of the student and numbers of sessions.
And Ken, there's someone who got on the call a little bit late. Can you explain attendance for remote learning?
Yeah, I actually don't think we addressed this directly. So there will be a check-in time for students to account for their attendance. That doesn't necessarily need to be during the time that class meets. I know at the middle school, it's going to be connected to their homeroom. At the high school, it's connected to their second period class. We will have a virtual option or a digital option for students basically to be able to say, I'm checking in for the day. This is what my plan is and what I'm going to be working on. that accounts for their daily attendance. Furthermore, it will also be checked by a measurement of the student learning. So whatever assignments they've been asked to complete, whatever tasks they're working on, those will also help individual classroom teachers during the other periods of the day show that they've been engaged in the work for that particular day.
And the next question also is on attendance. So if our children are sick and we're keeping them home with cold symptoms, their absent rate is likely to increase. How does this affect their minimum attendance needs?
I would say if they're homesick, they could still be participating with remote learning. I mean, if they're super sick, then they should be in bed resting, but unless that's a chronic problem, then they should still be able to participate remotely.
And I believe this is the last question that's in the chat at this point. If we had said yes or no to the bus and now need to switch, can we do that?
If you are speaking right now, yes, absolutely, we can make that accommodation. Along the way, we will probably have to make that decision on a case-by-case basis. We're asking a commitment from people just so that we can make sure that we have a minimum number of students on our buses.
But I would
A
offer,
maximum number.
if your family situation changes, anybody moves, you have some kind of an event that makes it so that you need transportation when you didn't now, call the bus garage and we'll do our best to accommodate your request. Everybody's entitled to that transportation. And so we really want to meet your needs at the same time that we're meeting the challenge before us. No one has asked on either of these calls the million-dollar question for Laura Watson: how am I going to get meals on the remote days for my kids? All that free chicken and cheese and produce. Let's hear about how they get their meals during this time, Laura.
Okay, so we're going to have remote pickups for the meals. We'll have signups so we can accommodate at each building level. It'll be on Wednesdays from 12 to 2 in the bus circles. And if they have multiple kids in all the different buildings, then they can just choose a building to have them picked up from. We'll have the menus online actually within the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
If anyone has any last questions, please place them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm so grateful for you for being here. We will, out of the 3 calls, pick the one that seems the most comprehensive and post it to our website so that people can access it who maybe weren't able to make one of the 3 meetings. I hope you all have a great night. We're going to figure it all out together. Please know that we're well intended. And if it feels like we're not getting something right, just talk to us. This is a whole new experience for all of us. And we are working really hard to do well by our employees and our students and our families. So just contact any of us and we'll do our best to help you. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great night.